Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Not least because it's my first lecture since 2 years. My first in-person lecture since 2 years, and I hope it goes well. I'm a bit out of training. You're going to be scientists, and it's about to be Christmas, so I thought I'd do this a little bit lighthearted and teach you how to be a pseudoscientist in 9 lessons for beginners. You heard already a lot about me, so I don't need to repeat this. Published a lot of stuff, published a lot of books, and here are some of these books. The central one, at least in this picture, is this one, where I have brought 3 copies, and that has a reason, because if you don't fall asleep, you can win one of these copies during the lecture by answering questions correctly. The other book that requires perhaps a mention is Trick or Treatment, because I'm going to come back to that during my lecture. That was together with somebody else. Before I begin, 2 definitions. A pseudoscientist is somebody who practices pseudoscience. So we need to define pseudoscience, and I define it as a belief or practice which falsely presents itself as scientific while lacking the validity, plausibility, reliability, or status of science. It's a very broad definition, but I think you get the idea roughly. And now I'm going to go straight into the 9 lessons for beginners. The first lesson, when, at least in my field of research, alternative medicine, or so-called alternative medicine, you need to invent a theory that is bizarre or relates to a treatment, and there are many examples for that. For instance, the Himalayan cure for constipation is not very practical, might not serve the right purpose. This is one that I invented. It's also not very popular. And so you might look into something else. Here we have radiation, we have a duck, we have the Berlin Wall, we have a telephone, and we have a penis which is gonorrheic. And that is, of course, homeopathy. You may think that homeopathy is based on plants. This is what the advertisements usually say. But here you have the 6 remedies. This one is from gonorrhea, made out of gonorrhea. The 30 means it's diluted 30 times at a ratio 1 to 100. So you don't need to worry about any infectious material being in there, but the starting material was what I showed you on the slide. You have X-ray, which is very curious because it highlights the fact that you can make homeopathic remedies out of non-materials. You have the Berlin Wall. You have the duck. This, by the way, is the best-selling homeopathic remedy against flu, and it's made out of a duck, out of the liver and the heart of a duck. And here you have the mobile phone, like the X-ray, non-material. So that if that is not a bizarre treatment, I don't know what is bizarre. I better explain a little bit about homeopathy. It's based on two principles, like cures like and less is more, and based on Samuel Hahnemann 200 years ago. He invented that. And like cures like, less is more sounds very mysterious, but it's actually very simple. If you cut an onion, your eyes might start to water. For homeopaths, that means conditions associated with watery eyes need to be treated with onion. If you have difficulties establishing personal relationships, the Berlin Wall might be good, because it inhibited personal relationships. I'm not quite sure what the gonorrhea is good for, but X-ray, if X-rays cause irritation of the skin, so if you have a certain type of irritation of the skin, you might get an X-ray, a homeopathic X-ray. And less is more, schematically shown in this slide. You start with 100% of your gonorrheic efflux, and you dilute it 1 to 100. That would be a C1, which then is diluted 1 to 100 to become a C2, etc., etc. You see that the concentration really very fast goes down to 0. So there's no gonorrhea in the gonorrhea remedy. Does it work? How would anybody think that this could work if there's nothing in it? Homeopaths say that this dilution, which by the way also involves shaking of the remedy at each dilution step, is not really dilution. They call it potentiation. Each dilution step makes the remedy stronger, not weaker, stronger. So and they know, of course, that it's unlikely to be working on a molecular basis. They say there's some sort of energy or spirit being transmitted from remedy to remedy. So I'm showing you this. Homeopaths are very proud of this study, and I'm proud to show it to you because it's from Bristol. It's an observational study. A large sample of patients were treated in the Bristol Homeopathic Hospital. I'm coming back to that shortly. They were treated with homeopathy, and 71% reported positive outcomes. And the investigator concluded, and that's a quote, "Homeopathic treatment is a valuable intervention." What's wrong with that? Well, you need to know that an observational study doesn't have a control group, so you don't know whether they wouldn't have improved anyway. You need to know that there was. They also had, if necessary, conventional treatments, these patients, and therefore there are lots of explanations which do not involve homeopathy at all. The conventional medicine, the placebo effect, natural history of disease, regression towards the mean, and other factors that might have played a role. And that you probably have seen in different forms and shapes. We're talking of a very low level of evidence here. Observational studies in this hierarchy of evidence are not ever very conclusive, and therefore we ought to look at experimental studies, and there are quite a few even in homeopathy. This is one we did, not very far from here. It was conducted in Taunton and Exeter, and we randomized just under 100 children with asthma. We used children because homeopaths think that children respond better than adults. We used asthma because asthma is supposed to respond very well to homeopathic treatment. And we randomized these children to get individualized homeopathy. This is important to homeopaths, that the treatment is individualized, meaning tailor-made to the characteristics of that child. They were treated with homeopathy or placebo, and main endpoint was quality of life. The result showed no effect in quality of life or other endpoints. And our conclusion, no evidence that adjunctive homeopathy is superior to placebo. Now here we are again with this hierarchy of evidence. So, and I have to stress there are plenty, about 500 studies of homeopathy, and I just showed you one which we did. So we need to climb up here in this pyramid and maybe do some systematic reviews or meta-analysis to get a more reliable answer. Systematic reviews, and that's, you know probably as well as I do, projects where all the available data is assessed and critically evaluated in order to generate a new overall result. That's the principle of a systematic review. And we in Exeter have published plenty of those. Here's one, homeopathy for eczema. Not many trials, just one randomized clinical trial, two non-randomized clinical trials, and the conclusion, the evidence from controlled clinical trials fails to show that homeopathy is an efficacious treatment for eczema. So not a very good result for homeopathy, but there's so many systematic reviews nowadays of homeopathy, 53 I think currently, that I once decided to do something really odd, to do a systematic review of systematic reviews, and that was published quite some time ago, and concluded the clinical evidence for homeopathy does not warrant positive recommendations for its use in clinical practice. That is a polite way of saying it doesn't work. Australian investigators have done that more recently and found many more systematic reviews than we did in 20 years ago, and they concluded in a more Australian fashion, the evidence does not show that homeopathy is effective, much more direct and abrupt. Meanwhile, well over a dozen international committees, independent agencies have looked at the data and have all agreed more or less on this end result. There's something missing. There's a slide missing, and I think this is already the next lesson about the next lesson is in order to become a pseudoscientist, you need to know how to cheat and mislead people with apparently sound clinical research. And this is the first example. It's the same example from the Bristol study. There's obviously nothing wrong with doing an observational study. What is really hugely misleading here is the conclusion. Because as I've shown you previously, there are many other factors than the homeopathic treatment that could have caused the result. So that's one way of cheating with science, which you must do as a pseudoscientist, but there are many, many other ways. And one particular method that I have published about quite a bit, and I'm exceedingly angry about, is this study design, which I call A plus B versus B trial design. It's a trial design that, if you think about it, can never produce a negative result, and therefore, even before you write your grant application, the result is clear. And if that is so, the whole thing is a nonsense. And here's a concrete example, published not so long ago by a Viennese colleague of mine, Professor Fraas. He did a randomized clinical trial with 2 parallel groups, so that sounds very rigorous. 410 cancer patients were treated either with homeopathy plus standard care or standard care alone. So people who are not keyed up to that would tend to think that this is a rigorous trial. And the main endpoint was subjective well-being, and that improved significantly in the homeopathic group. The thing is really very simple. 2 amounts of money are always larger than 1 amount of money. And there are numerous ways of cheating with seemingly sound results, but the A plus B versus B design is probably the best, and it's certainly the most popular in alternative medicine. It looks rigorous because it can be randomized, it can be double-blind, etc., but it never, ever fails to generate a positive result. And therefore, it's misleading. Lesson number 3, you must avoid facts and use fallacies. There are plenty of fallacies. I'm just going through some of the more obvious examples. The appeal to popularity. Millions of patients use homeopathy. That is true. In India, for instance, it is very, very popular. In Brazil, it's very, very popular. Even in Britain, it's quite popular. Most patients are satisfied with it, otherwise they wouldn't use it. And many even pay out of their pocket for it, and they wouldn't pay out of their own pocket if it didn't work. Therefore, and that's the fallacy, homeopathy must be good. It's fallacious because it's simply not true. You can look into the history of medicine. You look at bloodletting or other treatments that once were popular. The degree of popularity is no measure for effectiveness. The appeal to tradition, homeopathy is 200 years old, acupuncture is 2,000 years old, and advocates of these treatments say it has stood the test of time, and it wouldn't have survived all these years if it didn't work. Wrong. Bloodletting survived thousands of years, and it didn't work. And the fact that a treatment has its basis in ancient history, where we didn't understand how the human body works, is not something necessarily positive. It can also be interpreted as something negative. It means the treatment has its basis in non-science, in assumptions, in implausibility. Appeal to authority, highly regarded individuals and institutions advocate my treatment, homeopathy for instance, and they wouldn't advocate it if it wasn't good, would they? Here we have a list of these people. This is Mehmet Oz, a celebrity doctor in America who has his own television program, and last week announced that he's running for the Senate. So he's going to be a politician. He, in his television program, his television program, weekly I think, focuses on promoting quackery, basically. This guy you know, Usain Bolt, the fastest man on earth, is an advocate of homeopathy. This guy you know probably as well. He's also an advocate, not just of homeopathy, but every quackery under the planet. This guy, this woman is Olivia Newton-John, who thought she cured her first cancer with alternative treatments, now has a second cancer and tries to cure it with cannabis oil. This is Arnie, a fellow Austrian and American who advocates chiropractic very strongly, and this is Montagnier, who has the Nobel Prize for the AIDS virus, and he advocates homeopathy. And this guy is where you can win a book. Who is he? 2 Nobel Prizes, and you don't know who he is? This is a bit of a giveaway. He's got a Peace Nobel Prize and one in chemistry. Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling invented something in his later years which is called also molecular medicine, which is high-dose vitamin C predominantly, and he thought that it was a cure-all, it was a cure for cancer. He died of cancer. Another appeal, another fallacy, appeal to nature. It's natural, and therefore it must be harmless. Well, first of all, these treatments aren't natural. There's nothing natural in diluting X-rays or gonorrhea efflux. There's nothing natural in sticking needles into the skin of people, like in acupuncture, and there's nothing natural in moving the vertebral joints beyond its physiological range, like in chiropractic. And none of these treatments are free of adverse effects. This relates to something we published a long, long time ago. At the time, it was so novel that we managed to publish it in Nature. It refers to these figures here. On a very large sample of the British population, we reported that about 16% of patients having chiropractic spinal manipulation report adverse effects, about 12% after acupuncture, about 10% after homeopathy, and about 8% after herbal treatments. After tons of more research, we know that the adverse effect rate of spinal manipulation is 50%. Every second patient after spinal manipulation has adverse effects. That is very well documented. These are mild to moderate, but there are also very severe complications in addition to that, and these can result in deaths, about 100 deaths being reported. Acupuncture, our initial figure was about right. Homeopathy, how can homeopathy have adverse effects if it doesn't contain anything? Well, homeopaths say that if they use the optimal remedy, then they this would cause an aggravation of the presenting symptom. And in my book, this is an adverse effect. And they claim this happens in 20% of patients. And with herbal remedies, we really don't know because that's such a broad umbrella. You can be looking at hemlock, which is not very healthy, or chamomile, which is probably quite healthy. Here's just another publication of mine, deaths after acupuncture, and what it says here, 86 deaths have been reported in the literature. That's nothing if you think that probably millions of treatments are carried out every day. But you have to bear in mind that this is certainly just the tip of the iceberg, because there's no post-marketing reporting system in any of these treatments. So we basically rely on the fact that somebody writes it up and publishes it, which is not often the case. And that's not all about risk. Possibly this is the most important slide of my talk. If used as an alternative for an effective treatment, even a totally harmless therapy can become life-threatening. And that's quite obvious to anybody who thinks hard about it. Here's some data from America. Cancer patients who this is the survival of the patients who did not use alternative treatments, and the much worse survival of patients who used alternative treatments. And that is probably not due to the effect of the alternative treatment, but it's due to the effect that if you use some alternative treatment, you take less seriously the actual cancer treatment, which are necessary for your survival. And best researched is that in terms of vaccination, which is such a hot topic at present, we have in Germany, in France, in Britain, a very vocal group of anti-vaxxers. And they are, if you dig deeper, you can trace them back to some alternative practitioner in many cases. And it's extremely well documented by us and others that homeopaths, naturopaths, chiropractors, etc., advise parents against vaccinating children. Time for the fourth lesson. Make as many bogus claims as you can get away with. That's pretty obvious that you need to do that in order to be successful. And is he still PM or has he resigned? Speaking of bogus claims. You go on the internet and you find bogus claims galore about all sorts of alternative treatments. Here some for chiropractic. We think that chiropractors treat backs, and if they do, they are not all that dangerous. But they treat all sorts of other things, and they treat children, which is, I think, quite worrying. That's another claim copied from the internet, promising a disease-free life if you have acupuncture. And homeopathy as a first aid, that is very interesting. And homeopathy virtually for anything, for any condition that you can think of, some homeopath would claim he can treat it. And then we have this guy who several years ago came out with this product, the Dutch herbal detox tincture, containing dandelion and artichoke, and for neither herbal ingredient do we know that it detoxes anything. If it takes anything out of you, then it's your money and not any poison. After making all these claims, you need to learn your fifth lesson, and this is you need to perfect your skills of cherry picking. Cherry picking is a hallmark of pseudoscience, as you may know, and just one example of how people do cherry pick. We have talked about systematic reviews already. Systematic reviews, you collect all the relevant data that you can find. That is symbolized here by this circle. And very often, by chance, you have some positive and some negative ones. With a proper systematic review, you then look at the quality of these trials, and you try to generate a conclusion from that. If you cherry pick with such a mixed bunch, you can obviously pick out the negative ones and make a systematic review of this, or you can pick out much more commonly the positive ones and conduct a systematic review on the positive data. If you're not totally cued on, as a reader of the final systematic review, you might not realize that this is cherry-picked, and you get a systematic review of a homeopath, which leads to a very conclusive conclusion that homeopathy works because all the trials that he analyzed are positive. That this is actually happening shows this example, systematic review of chronic low back acupuncture for chronic low back pain in a jolly good journal on top of it. Spine is one of the leading journals in back pain, and it's a meta-analysis of 25 randomized clinical trials. So as a consumer of this publication, you think, I can trust that one. The conclusion was positive. That's from the authors. But what you may not know as a reader of this publication, that the largest trial with 1,000 over 1,000 patients, was not included, just simply omitted. And if you do include it, the overall result turns into negative. Another example, this one from homeopathy, fairly recent. 32 randomized clinical trials of homeopathy, and they were looking at individualized homeopathic treatments, which, as I mentioned, is important in homeopathy. And the conclusion was the medicine prescribed in individualized homeopathy may have small, specific treatment effects. So a bit of a hesitant conclusion. What they don't tell you is that 2 high-quality trials were just simply not included without good reason. Both of these trials were negative. If you include them, the overall result would cease to be positive. Time for the 6th lesson. You must claim that you've found a cure-all, a panacea, that will increase your revenues tremendously if you have something that cures more than one disease, in fact, cures all diseases. And the way to do that is you claim that you treat the root cause of disease. Mainstream medicine, you say, only addresses the symptoms of diseases, but your ingenious treatments really goes much, much deeper and treats the root causes of disease. And that is actually done in acupuncture, homeopathy, and chiropractic, and other modalities. In acupuncture, the root cause is imbalance of the 2 life forces, yin and yang. In homeopathy, the root cause is disturbance of the vital energy, and in chiropractic, traditionally, the root cause of all disease is a subluxation, a misplacement of the spinal joints. And if you treat the root cause of any disease, it is clear that you cure any condition. So that's the trick that you have to adopt, and that's the trick that is being adopted in alternative medicine. And that's why homeopaths can claim not to be just first aiders, but be able to treat AIDS, asthma, cancer, cholera, diabetes, and virtually everything else. Time for lesson number 7. Charge exorbitant fees. That's obviously in your interest as a pseudoscientist, and I'll show you some examples. You can go on the internet and find an American healer who heals you via email or via telephone. And I recommend to you the spiritual healing and blessing for mind, body, and soul. That sounds reasonable. And you only need to pay $499 for that. Or if you're afraid of electromagnetic fields, this firm has developed a handy, very attractive little device that you position in your room, and it will protect you from all the dangers of electromagnetic fields for just $4,999. If that's not a bargain. Or Gwyneth Paltrow, who has made a career as an entrepreneur in quackery, and that sounds like a very good Christmas present for somebody, supports women's sexual desire, arousal, and mood for just and that's very cheap, $55 a month's supply. Lesson number 8, be economical with the truth. We are celebrating, as we speak, 100 years of the firm Veleda, manufacturer of homeopathic remedies and anthroposophic remedies. I went onto their website where they celebrate their 100th birthday, and I've copied for you verbatim the 4 claims that they make there. They say that homeopathy works by stimulating the body's own natural healing capacity. They say that in the UK we have 4 homeopathic hospitals. They say that it is homeopathy is the only alternative medicine incorporated into the NHS. And they say that active elements are in tiny doses in homeopathic remedies. Because it's their 100th birthday, I have, for no fee at all, corrected these statements. So here's my correction. Homeopathy does not work today. There are 0 homeopathic hospitals in the NHS. Homeopathy is no longer incorporated in the NHS, and active elements are absent in homeopathic remedies. Amazing how they, for their 100th birthday celebration, publish such lies. And here we have your next chance to win a book. Who are these guys in relation to Veleda? This is, I'm going to take home my books, huh? This is Rudolf Steiner, who some optimists call a philosopher, some critics have less flattering names for him. He's a founder of anthroposophical medicine together with Ita Legman. He was as I say, a philosopher perhaps. She was a doctor, and they created anthroposophical medicine, which is quite popular still in Germany, popular also in the UK. They also created a farming method. They also created an educational method. The Steiner schools may ring a bell to you. Anyway, these are the 2 guys that you didn't win a book with. Last lesson. When found out, go on the attack. Attack is by far the best defense, and by Jove, in alternative medicine, you will get a lot of attacks. Another book to win. Who is he? He's a friend of mine. He's Simon Singh, a particle physicist who has published several science bestsellers, 5 science bestsellers. And one day he phoned me up and said, "We are doing a book together." And I said, "No way. As a particle physicist, you will not understand medicine, and this is far too tedious to explain everything to you." Anyway, he convinced me, and we published a book, Trick or Treatment, together about 10 years ago. That was hugely successful and translated into almost 30 languages, I think. And he's a brilliant chap. When the British book was first published, he published an article in The Guardian to promote our book about chiropractic, which is one of the four main subjects of the book. And he disclosed in this Guardian article that the British Chiropractic Association, and that's a quote, happily promote bogus treatments. On these 5 words or so, he got sued for libel. The Guardian dropped him. Our book publisher dropped him, so I supported him throughout, but we were not very powerful, and he invested about £50,000 into his defense and won the case. You will remember that. And Simon, having a mentality like a fox terrier, after winning the case, said, and now I'm going to change libel law in Britain. And he changed that as well. So if you're being sued, you have a much better chance as a scientist nowadays, and that's thanks to Simon, who managed not to win you a book either. But speaking about personal aggressions against me, I had 2 legal actions against me personally. I had to defend myself. I had, in about 50 cases, that's an estimate, I had to call legal help, professional legal help. I had, at the University of Exeter, I had about 10 official complaints, one of which I'm going to show you in a minute, against my person, against my work. And I have about 1 ad hominem attack per day. How is that? Because I publish a blog, which you ought to visit, and sometimes that is very amusing, very heated, and brings about lots of insults against my person, which makes it interesting. I promised you to show you this. This is one of the complaints I got against me personally, and that was from Sir Michael Peat, first private secretary of His Royal Highness Prince Charles. And he says, I'm writing to you both as the Prince of Wales principal private secretary and acting chairman of His Royal Highness's Foundation for Integrated Medicine. That's important, that sentence, because later, when Dispatches made a television program about that, Prince Charles denied that he knew about this letter. Anyway, the letter accuses me of very serious wrongdoings, and instead of defending me, my institution in Exeter aggressed me and had a 13 months investigation into what I was doing, at the end of which I was pronounced innocent, but it was too late. My department had fallen apart, all funding had gone, and the department closed. It doesn't exist anymore. And that's thanks to Charlie. Time to finish. I think I hope I installed in you second thoughts about becoming a pseudoscientist. I hope I convinced you that science, after all, is better than pseudoscience. And these are my conclusions. The fight against pseudoscience is endless, and we cannot win it, but we must fight it. It's an action of a damage limitation, basically. But we have to be clear, it's unwinnable. And by far the best antidote is science. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. If we could basically get some questions from the audience, and if you could repeat the question when it's asked so that
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, really great talk. Really interesting. I've got two questions, if I may. So the first one, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're clearly advocating the biomedical model of medicine. So first of all, what's your motivation for investigating, well, the sort of homeopathic and alternative medicine? And the second question is, how do you feel your principles of pseudoscience apply to scientists within the biomedical and more traditional research or traditional medicine research?
Well, first question was why did I decide to become a researcher into alternative medicine? I was prior to that I was at the University of Vienna, and I was a bit disenchanted with becoming an administrator of a very large department. My love had always been doing research, and my hobby had always been alternative medicine. I grew up in a family, I was surrounded by alternative medicine. My father, my grandfather were both doctors. My father practiced a little bit alternative medicine as well as mainstream medicine. Our family doctor was a prominent homeopath. My first job was in a homeopathic hospital. So I really started on the wrong foot. And then after the homeopathic hospital, I came to London for the first time, and was employed as a research assistant in a lab. Became a basic scientist for quite a while. For about 10 years, I was conducting basic science, and that opened my eyes in a way, and strengthened my second foot. Then I became a proper clinician, and in the back of my mind there was still always were these questions, because in the homeopathic hospital I had seen patients getting better with homeopathy. How can this be if there's nothing in the remedies? But they did get better. So I had a lot of questions, and I knew that there was little research going on. So I did some studies. Then one day, almost by coincidence, I saw the advertisement for the Exeter post. And as I said, I was ready to leave Vienna. And I applied to it. And with a few studies and projects that I had conducted, I got that job. Which something that hardly was my hobby horse became my job. But I had meanwhile been trained as a solid scientist. So for me, it was clear that the only approach was to apply the rules of science to that field. That made me a lot of enemies, obviously, and they said, you cannot do that. Our treatments are so subtle, so holistic, so special. You cannot fit them into the straitjacket of proper science. But that's, of course, is nonsense, as I've tried to show you. And that, I think, already answers your second question, in a way, or doesn't it?
Well,
what?
I feel like all the principles that you have outlined may as well apply to people that, cherry-pick the results, want to show positive results of certain biomedical treatments, and especially in the US, because, there's lots of evidence gaps with traditional treatments as well. So not all treatments that we have are purely based on best evidence available. So I wonder what your thoughts were on, your 10 principles, whether they could be taken into traditional medicine as well and be used for making money out of biomedical treatments.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I had remained in conventional medicine, I would have today given you the same lecture and applied it to a criticism of mainstream medicine. I'm not for 1 minute trying to say that there's no reason to criticize conventional medicine. But one thing is for sure, that the evidence base is not perfect, but it's way more solid than in alternative medicine.